Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the incredibly powerful and surprisingly simple life philosophy of a young man named Sam Burns, whose wisdom is just, well, it continues to inspire millions. This right here. This is the statement that started it all. And coming from a teenager dealing with progeria, which is a rare, rapid-aging disease, it's just such a profound thing to say. It's really the core of his entire outlook. So, how on earth did he get there?
Well, to really get what he's talking about, you have to hear this story first. It's a story about a dream that seemed, for all intents and purposes, completely impossible.
Like a lot of high school kids, Sam's dream was pretty straightforward and relatable. He wanted to join the marching band, he wanted to make music with his friends, but there was a huge hurdle in his way.
And this is where it gets kind of crazy. The physics of it were just staggering. See, Sam only weighed about 50 pounds. The standard snare drum and harness, that thing weighed a crushing 40 pounds. I mean, that's almost his entire body weight. It was by any normal measure physically impossible for him to carry.
But here's the thing. Instead of just accepting that as a dead end, they got creative. This wasn't a limitation, it was an engineering problem. And engineering problems have solutions. And this was the solution. They engineered a brand new, totally custom snare drum harness that weighed only 6 pounds. And just like that, the impossible became possible. And that's the whole point, right? This story is so much more than just a kid playing a drum. It's the perfect illustration of the very first principle in his philosophy for a happy life.
Okay, so let's really get into it. Philosophy Part 1. It's all about being okay with what you ultimately can't do, because there is so much you can do.
See, Sam was smart. He didn't waste a single ounce of energy dwelling on his physical limitations. He knew they were there, sure, but he made a conscious choice to pour all his energy and focus into this whole world of possibilities that was still wide open to him.
And you can see his mindset right here in action. I mean, yeah, okay, he couldn't run a long distance, and he couldn't ride the most intense roller coasters. But look at his can-do list. It's huge. Scouting, music, comics. And the key thing here, the real game changer, is that line about making adjustments. The drum harness is the ultimate example of that, of actively figuring out how to move something from the can't-do column over to the can-do column.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that choice. It's a conscious shift in perspective. Moving your mental energy away from what you've lost and putting it squarely on what's possible. That was the absolute foundation of his happiness.
And that way of thinking leads perfectly into the second part of his philosophy, which is all about the people you surround yourself with.
See, Sam really got something fundamental. The people around you, they literally shape your world. So he was super intentional about who he let into his life. He knew how lucky he was. He had this amazing, supportive family and a really tight-knit group of friends at school, his fellow band geeks, as he'd say, who just valued him for him. This network was his anchor, It was a space where he could just belong.
And think about this. When Sam was playing music with his friends, the experience of creating something together, it just completely transcended the progeria. In those moments, he wasn't a kid with a disease. He was just a drummer in a band. That's the incredible power of having a high-quality community.
All right, so that brings us to the third and final piece of his philosophy. And this one is all about momentum. It's about creating a mindset that is always looking towards a bright future. He actually had this favorite quote from Walt Disney that he really lived by. Keep moving forward. It wasn't just a nice phrase for him, he actively built his entire mindset around that idea.
And this is such a powerful, actionable idea. Having something positive on the horizon, it could be the next comic book, a big game, a family trip. It gives your mind a positive goal to focus on. It acts like this cognitive anchor that can literally pull you through the difficult times.
And what's so brilliant about this is that it shows his philosophy wasn't about some kind of toxic positivity. He wasn't pretending bad days didn't happen. No, instead, he had this practical process. First, accept the feeling. Don't ignore it. Then, acknowledge it. Really let it in. And then, you do what's necessary to move past it so you don't get stuck.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this all sounds wonderful, in theory. But what happens when things get really, truly difficult? Well, Sam actually had to put his own principles to the ultimate test.
So there was this time he was in the hospital for a bad chest cold, and he was sick and totally isolated from everything that gave him his identity, his friends, his band, his family. This was it. This was where the rubber met the road.
And even there,
In that hospital bed, he put his philosophy right into practice. He focused on what he could do. Be brave. He leaned on his support system, and he kept moving forward by looking toward a future where he felt healthy again. This proved his philosophy wasn't just for good days, it was a powerful tool for resilience.
And he leaves us with this final, kind of joyful piece of advice. A simple reminder to say yes to life, to embrace celebration, and to just show up for the happy moments whenever you possibly can.
You know, in the end, Sam's philosophy isn't really complex. It's a series of conscious choices. So he kind of leaves us with this question. It's an invitation for us to pause, look ahead, and identify that next bright spot on our own horizon, no matter how small it might seem. So what's yours?